Started.
I'll see you.
Yeah, we'll talk. Please make sure you have your snacks and your seats. Welcome to the last Zube lecture of the semester. By now, I think most of you know that my name is Peter Dunn, and I'm the faculty coordinator of the Zube lecture series. Thank you, Henry. This is an exciting final lecture, if we can call it that, for the semester. We've had a lot of great visitors this semester, but today we are welcoming our own PhD students who are going to share some of their work with you, which is a great opportunity for them because maybe you know PhD students just kind of work by themselves for a long time, and so it's a good chance for them to come out of their research hovels and share what they've been working on with us. But it's a good opportunity for all of us because we get to see what is the cutting edge of research happening in urban planning today. So to introduce today's format and today's speakers is the director of the PhD program, Elizabeth Hinfield.
Thanks, Peter. We just do a little round for Peter for doing this all year. And his able assistant, so.
Recording in progress.
All right, so thank you for coming today on this incredibly beautiful day when the trees are like rejoicing. Soon you'll be rejoicing because your classes will be done. We're going to hear work from 4 doctoral students who are at different stages. One of them is officially a doctor, Mohammed, Abdelaal, and he'll go last. Tosin is joining us, is going first. She is in our newer cohort, so this is work in progress that she'll be presenting. And in between we have, so Tosin starts us out, Tosin Bamidele. Close enough? Okay. I worked on pronunciation. Ruben Flores-Marzan, who goes second. I'll briefly introduce each speaker as they come up too. Sagar Hiware will present remotely from Cincinnati, and then Mohammed Abdelaal will bring us, so everybody's going to be short. You'll get a real sense of the breadth of our doctoral students' interests and how amazing they genuinely are. So with that, turn it over to Tosin. While she gets set up, I'll just mention Tosin comes to us originally from Nigeria. She came over and studied at Iowa State, where I actually worked for a while, but we didn't overlap. And then she's also a registered architect and was working in New York as an architect before coming back for her doctoral degree in regional planning. So she's got a great job.
Can everyone hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yep, speak up, sister.
Let me know if my voice is too low. I've heard that I talk like in very muted tones. But yeah, hi everyone. I'm the baby of the group, and I'm just excited to be here and share what I've been exploring for the past year. What I'm going to be talking today about is graffiti and focusing on the Bronx, and my interest in this area came as a result of a class that I took with Dr. Ingram last year in the advanced planning theory. And we spoke about storytelling and planning, and it was just a really interesting discussion. I was like, interesting. So I started to explore that some more. In a nutshell, when we talk about graffiti, most times we look at it from a place of nuisance or art, and I've just been wondering, what if we looked at it as something more? In the Bronx, for example, graffiti functions as something deeper that people have a connection to, and it's some sort of spatial language. It's a grassroots way of telling stories of the people that belong in certain neighborhoods. And in my explorations for the past year, one of the questions I've been asking is, what kind of story is this telling? How does it tell about the lives of people that live in the neighborhood, their experiences, or what they're going through? And for this presentation, I'll be focused on the patterns that can be observed spatially that can signal neighborhood transformation, perhaps displacement, before it takes hold. So at the core of this exploration basically is one simple question that I've been asking, which is basically,
how can spatial and symbolic patterns of graffiti be defined? How can they be measured? How can they be interpreted as indicators of neighborhood transformation and potential displacement risk? And here I examine how and where graffiti shows up and what it says. So I have a series of questions that I've been asking. Is this quite bright or is it dark? Can you guys see it?
It's okay.
It was meant to look better than this. Sorry. The first few questions I'm asking are, what qualifies as spatial pattern and what qualifies as symbolic pattern? And I'm supposed to have another slide show up here, but I define spatial patterns essentially as I'm looking at density, I'm looking at spatial distance from one another, I'm looking at different zones, I'm looking at hotspots. And when thinking about symbolic patterns and thinking about memorials and themes around which graffiti is coded. So an example of spatial patterns, you're looking at the geography of cultural expression in corridors where we would normally associate disinvestment and now maybe some redevelopment, like White Plains Road and like 3rd Avenue and Hutchinson. These are places where visual expression also thrives. And when thinking about spatial or symbolic patterns here, we can see through photographs how different themes, either through memorial walls or flags or some homage to local figures or bold color choices, you can group these patterns or these styles of graffiti together. And they reflect shared history, they reflect grief, some story or some pride. Many of them are actually in zones that are currently undergoing a lot of redevelopment or pressure to get redeveloped. The next question I ask is, how do these patterns correlate with urban change? Now that we have a brief overview of spatial and symbolic patterns. And to this, I came up with the first hypothesis. Here I was saying that neighborhoods with lower home ownership, lower income, and less college attainment would often show a higher presence of graffiti. And these are traits that we associate with neighborhood vulnerability, which is what I tested next. So I looked into socioeconomic indicators like median household income and the percent of residents who are college educated. And these showed me that neighborhoods with more homeowners tend to have fewer graffiti reports. And it supports the idea that residential stability deters visible markers of disorder. Median household income, on the other hand, it trends negatively, but it's only marginally significant from this chart. And it reflects that higher income neighborhoods experience slightly less graffiti. I did not see any correlation between, college educated percentage of people, so it's not really relevant to the points we're making. I call this multi-factor hotspots. The reason being that neighborhoods that were found to exhibit heightened graffiti density, temporary public art, low home ownership rates, and elevated property values coincided in this spot, and they tended to report more graffiti. So this supports theories of instability and disinvestment. And the numbered circles just represent the clusters of places where graffiti was reported that are heavily impacted by these different factors. So what I find striking about this chart that I just shared is the fact that this is where public art is being commissioned. And by public art, I'm referring to New York City's collaboration with individual artists to build something nice. But we're talking about places that are vulnerable. So while these are beautiful, it's important to think about how places like Westchester, East Fordham, Hunts Point are neighborhoods that are facing serious challenges like poor air quality, overcrowded schools, rising noise levels, and it checked for these. But somehow the city saw it important to instead invest in art rather than tackle these critical issues. So it just raises important questions about visibility versus vulnerability in the community. And things that I'm asking myself are these artworks meant to support the community, or are they signals that neighborhood is being rebranded for outside investment? And when graffiti, whether it's uncommissioned or unsanctioned, shows by, how do we decide what kind of markings, I guess, are welcome? How do we decide what's is wiped away? These are places that I pass by quite frequently when I'm in New York, and there are a lot of tourist buses that come there, but I don't think any of that money goes to members of the community. So the next question, now that we know that the level of home ownership can be a predictor of the level of graffiti presence in the neighborhood, asking how can graffiti function now as a predictive signal of displacement? And my hypothesis here is that the density of graffiti differs significantly across neighborhoods experiencing different levels of redevelopment pressure. And here I ran an Innova and Taki test to see the different levels of redevelopment and see whether there was some sort of correlation between the presence of graffiti and the level of development that was taking place. So by taking the mean value of properties where people got, trying to remember the word now, permits to build renter-occupied units, and averaging that, I was able to then group this into some sort of like an average of 3, spacing out from that word, and then I guess group them together and see how that correlated with the density of graffiti that occurred in that place. So I found it statistically significant. Graffiti increases with redevelopment pressure, so neighborhoods that are under higher redevelopment pressure tend to report more graffiti on average. And the implication of this is that graffiti may serve as an early visual indicator of spatial stress surfacing in areas that are experiencing social flux, potential displacement, and contestation of space. And this really aligns well with the theory that redevelopment pressure, for example, more rental units and recent changes in place corresponds with greater community contestation and visual resistance via graffiti. And finally, I was asking, what does graffiti reveal about community voice and resistance? And beyond quantitative data, I have been conducting interviews with some graffiti artists in the city. I had the opportunity to interview some really cool people who have been part of, like the OG graffiti culture and from the 1970s. And from listening to them, one thing that stood out was that graffiti emerged as a thermometer of what's happening on the ground. So 2 particular interviews stood out to me from graffiti artists who go by Crash and Nicer, and I highlight them in the next slides. Here you have Crash, who talks about graffiti as a community temperature check. He talks about how the colors and flags are emotional and cultural symbols. They reflect ownership of space. And he also spoke about the fear of people. Many times when you see graffiti present in a neighborhood, it could also just reflect fear from residents that some new construction is going on there and they're going to be chased out of the place or priced out of their neighborhoods. So they do that just to deface some properties. And I go into that in detail in other data sets or data explorations. On the future of graffiti, he's someone that seems quite excited about how it's going to evolve, for younger generations and how they're beginning to divest into other mediums. And he started this initiative called Graffiti for Good, where instead of defacing new structures, he brings together new artists, or upcoming artists, to work with the government to execute some percent for art projects or do something in a more legal way, in jail. And then Nicer also had things to say about graffiti as cultural survival in gray spaces, which stood out to me because he had a very interesting mind talking about how, well, a lot of these communities are usually gray, there's no green, the buildings are not painted often, and his work gives them some sort of modern day Monet in the Bronx, and I like the way he expressed that, and also addressed the issue of being called a vandal, talking about his experiences with the police, and taking pride in his art form and saying this was one thing that kept him out of prison, and being proud of it as an American art form. He compared that to Cubism. Well, so in a nutshell, what does graffiti tell us? I think it tells us that the signs are on the walls, and we need to pay attention as designers, as planners. All the naming, all the murals, all the tags that we see, most times we overlook them because we're looking to more formal means of arriving at conclusions or arriving at decisions for planning. But I think if we listen closely to these people, it might just show us where we need to plan the next structure, the next building, especially for people who are interested in public planning or in planning of communal spaces. And it might point to where a neighborhood is headed economically and in other senses. So I hope that we begin to treat these markings not just as a mass, but as messages, especially when it comes to participatory open data. This is a very condensed version of all the work I've been doing for the past year. If you want to know more detail, please email me and let's talk more about that. Thank you.
A quick question for it?
Thank you, Tosin. That was super interesting. Really interesting, and what looks like really original, well-executed research. I'm curious, in those correlational graphs you had, how are you distinguishing, or are you including both what we call graffiti and public art?
No, I distinguish them. So for graffiti, I used 311 data from New York, where all reports on crime are being logged. So it's a very huge data set, and I sorted that out by graffiti. So I looked into graffiti reports over the last decade, between 2014 and...
Oh, these are people who've actually called in,
Yeah, people call in and report the tags. So I distinguish between... I'm just going to pause. I distinguish between that, the bigger blue dots that I had represented city collaborations.
So that would be graffiti.
So this will be graffiti.
Okay.
This is not legal. This is something that someone would call for a 311 call. And then, so exactly, this map, you see, these represent everything, all the calls that people have placed to report graffiti over the past decade. But the bigger circles represent the ones that the city actually acknowledges as legal art form
That distinguishes it,
and pays people to do.
But the correlations you were showing were the graffiti, not the public art.
No, I found no statistical correlation between public art and home ownership, college education, and so I left her out of the presentation.
We should probably stop there, but that was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Using numbers to understand graffiti. It's a wonderful thing. Our next speaker is Ruben Flores-Marzan. I've known Ruben for a number of years now. Ruben was, in a previous career, the principal planner for Puerto Rico. He has done a lot of different things, including working for Roxbury Community College. And currently he is the policy advisor for environmental and community engagement for the ISO New England, which is the agency that regulates power in our region. So he does a lot of community engagement in that. But that's not what he's going to talk about. He's going to talk about his dissertation.
So planning is what you want to make out of it, right? You know, you join, you go through the motions, you graduate, you work, and then you think it stops. It doesn't. Actually, the problems become more interesting to solve. That's what drives me as a planner. So, Hurricane Maria. You all heard about Hurricane Maria, and if you came to the island during that time, I appreciate you. If you didn't, now you get to know what happened. At least my analysis of what happened. So let's see. And you can see that. All right. So I've broken down my presentation in just a few portions here, a couple of slides. Been studying this thing for 8 years now. So there's a ton that I could say, but I will save you the time. And you can obviously attend my defense once I'm done and ready to go. This is a great slide. This is Hurricane Maria coming into Yabucoa, Puerto Rico, on the southeastern coast of the island on September 20th, 2017. It is possibly the last imagery before the whole thing went kaput. You know, the power went out and people just hunkered down until the very next day. What's interesting to me here is that all the modeling in the world was able just to give us, you know, kind of like a snapshot. Well, it's going to rain between 12 to 18 inches and maybe 25 inches. It ended up raining 38 inches, like almost a foot of additional rainfall. A lot of people died. A lot of people were not expecting the catastrophic impact of the hurricane. And we are, yes, when you are born and bred and grow up in Puerto Rico, you kind of like have this routine. I think I was telling Camille that several months ago. You said, okay, so the hurricane is going to make landfall at 3. That means that you can wake up at 9, have some breakfast, go out, you know, take a nap before the thing happens, and just hunker down, play, talk to family members at home. And around 5, 6, you go out and you start like cleaning up a little bit. If it's nightfall, you just sleep it off, and the next day you start over. That actually wasn't the case with Maria. And I don't need to go through all the gory pictures and all that because it really doesn't make any sense to bring that out. But 8 years later, we are still trying to find out what really happened. Why was it so drastic when you compare the 3 major hurricanes hitting the island within the last 50 years? Hurricane Hugo, Category 3, Georges, Category 3, and then Maria, Category 4. It was like 1 mile per hour off Category 5 status. But you take a look at the wind pattern. 103 miles per hour for Hugo, 89 for Georges, and then 155 for Maria. So in terms of wind, Maria was like, whoa, you know, completely an outlier, statistically speaking. Rainfall, you already heard that. Fatalities, look at that number. I mean, that's super tragic. And then look at the damages. 94 billion compared to 1.5, 1.75 to 5.7. Number on Georges, that discrepancy is attributed to basically lack of a scientific consensus about, you know, reaching out that economic impact analysis. That was done by a local economist. Joaquin Villamil, he's retired now. So obviously this is not a drill. You know, people actually die in this stuff. And it's sad that we really haven't learned these lessons 8 years later, when you also start thinking about, oh, not just Maria, how about Michael in 2018, the Florida Panhandle? What about Helene in North Carolina? What about the Palisades fire? All these fires, these are fire hurricanes, you know, and we really haven't thought about a way of, you know, minimizing the loss. So you go through this thing and you start thinking out loud with friends and in the privacy of your own brain. To me, my idea was, could it be climate change? Like I said before, Hurricane Irma, 2 weeks before, Category 5, over 10 inches of rain fell on the island. But then the wind bands wasn't really that much of a problem. There's still, 10 inches of rainfall, and then 2 weeks later you get 38. It's almost 50 inches of rain. So the ground was already saturated by the time Maria came. So you read FEMA's and NOAA's and all these federal agencies' reports on the ground. Code implementation was an issue. Yeah, that's not news. Puerto Rico has had a lot of economic problems during its heyday as a Commonwealth of the U.S. Also as a colony versus Spain and then the U.S. But I have a personal opinion about that. It's about, you can have all these political situations in place, but that's what land use planning is, all these issues that is locally controlled. So, there are ways of thinking about these things and ensuring that things are better for the community. After all, as a planner, if you read the Code of Ethics, and I hope you guys have done that before, we're here to safeguard the public interest. So if you don't know what that is, go to the APA website and find it out. What's good planning, bad planning? What does that mean? There's research on that, great people have done work in the past. So these were all musings in my head as I was trying to approach how to study this problem, this real world problem. Thankfully, my committee, my doctoral committee, Elizabeth Infield, bless your heart, and Henry and John, Mark Seasons, they informed me along the way. And you obviously make mistakes, but this is part of the process, it's trial and error. And you continue getting inputs of information, of data, and trying to, assess it in your head, what's going on here. So, where I started with my literature review was actually those assumptions that I had, and then that informed me about, what to look for. Elizabeth Infield, she's an authority in this subject. Mark Seasons, he's in Canada, and he's an authority in plan evaluation. And I kind of picked up on plan evaluation because in the end, the work as a planner is to make sure that you implement what you plan, but that you have to evaluate whether what you're implementing actually works or not. And you're nodding, right? That's it. So I was thinking, when you go out as a planner, you graduate from here, and you join an agency, you're gonna see a lot of people doing the same darn thing. You wanna stay away from those. You want to continue innovating. So short-term planning, short-range planning, which is about, when you get a development application, you review it, zoning, land use, impacts on the community, and so on and so forth. That's a great way to, inject this planning evaluation mindset. So whenever you approve something, make sure that there's people that can actually make sure that what the plans call for actually gets done. So Susan Carter, I do not know her personally. She's out of the University of South Carolina, but she extensively studied Katrina. So I just dove into her literature and methods. She developed the Social Vulnerability Index. You can Google that out, and it's very interesting, and it applies to a bunch of things. As a practicing planner, when you're in government, you need to be fluent in politics. So, historical institutionalism gives you that opportunity to look for the windows of opportunity to make positive change. These are my questions. That big question is in red, plan evaluations done the conformance way, which means to quantify whether you implemented your plans or not, and whether that works for protecting your communities against climate change. And then subsequent questions 1, 2, 3. So I went through the methods on question 1. I applied Hogan's historical institutionalism method, which is actually, critical junctures about looking at those opportunities and predicting when they're going to happen. Boom, grabbing the opportunity, get it while it's hot, so to speak. Economic prosperity over planning has been the dogma in Puerto Rico, but that has been changing since 1991, 92, when Puerto Rico passed the Professional Planner Act. So planners in Puerto Rico are professionally licensed. It's the equivalent of the AICP. You do not have many AICPs as planning leaders in the island. I'm actually the only one that was a planning board president with the AICP designation, but also a Puerto Rican planning license designation. My research question for number 2 was about, so we can we quantify urban development, whether it fits the parameters of particular zoning districts. I decided on just approaching residentially zoning districts, no overlays. Overlays are just too quirky and computer kept crashing all the time. But out of those, there's development criteria, which are those 4 bullet points. So I was actually able to do a lot of clipping, a lot of select by location, a lot of select by attributes to get maps that would give me data to tell me whether a particular parcel in a particular zoning district would conform with the established zoning ordinance. So these are like screenshots of examples of when it conformed, when it didn't conform. And something that I just have to put here, I'm just going to go real quick. The average lot imperviousness is actually a non-conforming indicator. It's actually the percentage of land in a parcel that is occupied with impervious surfaces. And this is a problem when you have almost 50 inches of rain and that water cannot go anywhere. So ideally, a site will be designed to accumulate an X amount of water. So when you go off the reservation, so to speak, that water has to go somewhere. So hopefully my analysis will give you, some hard numbers to tell you the importance of this. And I think it might be a good tool for, as an alternative to flood mitigation maps by FEMA, which are like completely off the mark and totally unreliable. The predicting piece, I haven't done it. My numbers are in place. I just need to sit down with Dr. Rensky and go through that. But I have good ideas. I kind of know, which variables are those, but I'm going to save it for the defense. This is some imagery of, again, stuff that is conforming, and it was destroyed by rain in the town of Toa Baja, one of the hardest hit towns. And that's that. Next steps, I just want to get done because I'm going to work on something that I found out through this process. So HOPE is high observation plan evaluation. Essentially, instead of creating maps and huge documents, we all carry phones. So if we're able to have conformance planning evaluation information at the parcel and household level, people could basically trace their phone number. And if you're in Puerto Rico, I could actually give you, your conformance planning evaluation indicator data. And once I go through the prediction phase here, I could pretty much tell you, look out for these things. We didn't have this back in Puerto Rico. I haven't seen this anywhere. That's an actual image. Puerto Rico, after a hurricane, 2 days later, people are trying to find phone signal. relevance, quantify the stuff. Make sure that what you're working, it makes sense and it's valuable to your community. And adoption is the name of the game. Don't stay in your planning department for more than 5 years. Broaden your horizons. People are perfectly fine with counting parking spaces or building bike lanes. That's not gonna save us. And this is the perfect ending to my presentation because in the background, that's the governor's mansion. I will get hired and fired, almost fired, every single week. And it just gives me great memories of having gone through that stuff. It makes you resilient. Thank you. Preguntas, questions? Hey, how are you?
I'm well, how are you,
I'm
Ruben?
good. Happy to see you.
So, you give people information that tells them the probability that they're going to be wiped out. They know this information.
Mhm.
Where is going to be the pressure point that the people are going to put this information to? Rather than them becoming internally afraid, where are they going to go?
You know what, that's a great question, but when you're on the ground, you want to know.
Right.
Regardless if you do something or not. Chances are that people stay put, and that's perfectly fine. What I'm doing here is just providing information so that I can make better decisions in the absence of local and federal authorities, which haven't given them nada.
Okay. So that's step one.
Yes.
Right, so are students familiar with Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation, where the lower rungs are less participation and the higher rungs are more citizen power?
Right.
Is that in the back of your mind at all?
Of course.
Oh, okay, so we are gonna have a revolution.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Look at what's happening right now with the current administration. We're not getting any funding from the federal government. We're basically being told you're on your own. 8 years ago, we were told you're on your own, and by the way, here's some paper towel rolls. Right now, you're not even getting paper towel rolls.
All right,
So take charge.
okay,
So thank you.
thanks, Ruben.
Yes.
So say you get funding from the administration. I know that a lot of the funding in Puerto Rico goes to...
Hola, España.
Sí, soy de Puerto Rico, soy de Ponce. Mucho gusto.
Playita.
Like, it's going on
Uh-huh.
over, yep.
Yeah.
How can you advocate towards the money that is now going to, for example, building all these giant resorts and going towards tourism, to actually going towards developing communities that don't have that same mass appeal towards the tourist industry?
So it's about educating the public, right? And this is a marathon, first of all, you need to understand that. And if you're from Puerto Rico, you understand the dynamics in land use development. When we as planning board people say, you know what, it can happen, and I can show you that the projects can happen. The thing that where we are heavily missing the mark historically is that those public hearings are not public hearings. They're executive hearings when we have staff show us everything and then we make determinations. I was planning board president. I started a planning board in 2006, and I stayed there until the Fortunio administration left in 2013. So I tried to change that, but it doesn't work. And what you do is that you do what the best you can for the other guy.
Yeah.
Come in and do it.
Yeah.
That's the best you can do sometimes. But with this tool here, this approach, you could do it in Playita or whichever area of Ponce you live in, and hopefully throughout the nation. The power is in your hands. Is that like from a cartoon? I think, I'm not sure. I'm a Star Wars guy, so I don't know.
All right, thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. Gracias.
So our third presenter has run into some technical difficulties. So we're going to go directly to our fourth presenter, which is great. Mohammed Abdelaal is actually a different career path for PhDs than perhaps some others. He has worked in campus planning throughout his time here, and he's staying in campus planning, and will probably lead campus planning in 2 years, I'm guessing, maybe 3. And so, yeah, which is, I want to say that importantly for those of you who think that a PhD might be in your future, many PhDs go into academics, but not all of them. There's a whole sort of professional track that the PhD also enables. So, just food for thought and a great example for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm glad that this is after I graduated or after I finished, so it gives me a chance to take a breath and enjoy the moment. So, and thank you for inviting me. We all here are members of the UMass community, students, faculty, and staff, and both staff and former students. So we are very familiar with the higher education institutions, with the college campus. Most of us live on campus or near campus and have that experience. So every one of us is connected to the campus and affected by it. This is kind of the starting one, was one of the starting points for me. Higher education, college campus. Everybody at this time and age is so concerned about the future of higher education. The emerging challenges, the transformations taking place, and in the climate right now, in general, there's so much concern about what's going to happen next. What is the value of a college degree? The future job markets, the residential campus experience, and all these questions are in the minds of everybody. Colleges and universities in the US have been investing billions of dollars to build beautiful campus and a quality of place, state-of-the-art facilities, planning the campus to attract students as part of the competition with peer institutions. Now the question is, how do these emerging trends in higher education are impacting the college campus in the middle of all of this? So me, as somebody who's worked for a number of years as a campus planner and a project manager, currently my position is a project manager of campus planning, I wanted to understand how are we planning the campus in response to these challenges. So the goal was to study the emerging trends in higher education, and there's so many trends, you can name up to 20 or even 30 trends in higher education, and try to focus on the ones that are impacting the physical campus and how we plan them. Basically the issue is US colleges and universities need to reconsider their strategies when it comes to planning. The campus planning as a field of practice is an interesting one. It's multifaceted, the same as planning. Planning is an interesting field. All of you, I assume most of you are landscape architecture or regional planning students and architecture students. Same thing for campus planning. All the factors, all the historical and the theoretical influences that shape the field of city, regional, and community planning and architecture also impacted how campus planning has been taking place. Planning in general started as a design field similar to architecture, and over the years was transformed into a regulatory tool for city and community planning, and in more recent years it has been a tool to support senior decision makers. But the same theories and styles of architecture and planning apply to campus planning as well. My dissertation is studying the emerging trends in higher education and their impact for campus physical planning. Consists of 3 articles. In general, Article 1 is a semi-systematic literature review, consulting or studying 60 sources that discuss the subject, and it worked as a mini dissertation. In the beginning, I wanted to learn everything, study the state of knowledge related to this research problem. In my understanding, that there are gaps in the literature. This subject was studied. There are so many publications on it, but it's either partial or skewed or addressing particular aspects. to my knowledge, there's no one place in which all the factors impacting higher education and their influence on campus physical planning exist. So this is filling this piece here. Articles 2 and 3 are addressing the same research question pretty much, and it is to learn how are universities responding to these, are they aware of the issues and how they are responding to them through across case study analysis. Article 2, the document extensive effort to select and do document analysis, document data analysis, and Article 3 was the interview data analysis. Moving quickly to Article 1, again, this is systematic literature review, and the difference is, unlike the qualitative narrative literature review and the systematic literature review, which is more qualitative, that gives me a chance to do both. The dissertation is qualitative focused methodology in general for all the 3 articles, and it's an inductive process in which you collect the relevant data, as much relevant data as possible, and you do the analysis, open coding, influenced also by the grounded theory approach to qualitative analysis, and the multiple layers of categories, dimensions, themes, concepts are emerging from the data, and that is informing theory. In systematic literature review and semi-systematic literature review, which is very intense, very rigorous, you typically include review in the literature review protocols, which suggests, or which means that whoever is going to be doing the same research, following the same steps, will get the same results. That's very critical. Even though in the highly qualitative component, it still will lead to results that are not different from the conclusion, not different from the research being conducted. So the goal was we wanted to learn what these emerging trends are, what are the historical roots to this, how do they impact campus physical planning, and what are the subject matter experts and scholars saying about recommendations for what to do. And that's these 2 diagrams are presenting the data extraction process, how rigorous the process of the literature review, the identification of the documents, how to approach them, how to identify them, and how to reference and extract the relevant text, and how to do the elaborate process of open coding. To go quickly over the 3 pieces of Article 1, the historical background. Many of us know that after World War II, the US went through some amazing campus expansion, the educational explosion of the 1950s and onward, that basically every single campus in the country was growing, and hundreds of new campuses were added. Literally, I can argue that from 2,500 college campuses in the country, the number jumped to 4,000 campuses nationwide. This is an immense amount of facilities and buildings, and also a lot of the rapid construction in the 60s and the 70s were done to a quality level not to the highest quality level, and resulting to a quick decay of facilities later in the 80s, and until today actually we are dealing with the deferred maintenance problem. In the 70s, the knowledge-based economy, the emergence of computer science, pedagogies, and again, the decay of the 1980s. That worked as a background to the current expansion wave. So, in general, we can say there are 2 campus expansion waves, the post-war wave and the current wave that started sometime in the 1990s. And the background to this was the campus decay that was in the 1980s that we spoke about. So, fierce competition, if you build, they will come. State-of-the-art facilities, addressing the needs of the new generation of students, unlike the baby boomer generation. We're talking about Generation X and millennials and Generation Z, and their needs are completely different. Universities adopted the strategy that providing a quality campus are that philosophy and the way to attract smartest and brightest students. That's the way to compete with other universities. Is this strategy sustainable? That is the question. I'll try to go fast because I feel I'm going a little bit over time here. So the term emerging trends in higher education is very popular and used a lot by the Society of College and University Planning. For those who don't know, this is a great platform that has a lot of publications on the subject, and I use this for my literature. And as I said, it could be up to 30 or 40 trends in higher education. In this dissertation, I came up with 9, consolidating them here in 5 of them, in 4 of them. The top 3 will live with us until the end of the dissertation. We are talking about demographic changes, more women than men, older age students, more minority students. We are also talking about fluctuation in enrollments. We are also aware that because of the financial crisis of 2008, U.S. birth rates were reduced, and as a result, we are expecting by beginning 2027, there will be a drastic, sharp decline in enrollment, what's known commonly in higher education as a demographic cliff, that is going to be affecting college campuses. So the question is becoming, okay, you're building these beautiful campuses, while higher ranking institutions might do well, what about smaller colleges and those who are not very competitive? So there's a great risk for colleges. Evolving academic technology, pedagogies, learning modalities. The campus is the place, as I said, all of us are familiar with the classroom, the traditional classroom, how the classroom and the lecture hall used to look like 100 years ago. It's completely different from how a college and a lecture hall is today. We're talking about smart campus, a smart classroom, that all the technology is enabled. Now, online learning, remote learning, and I'm sure every single one of you was enrolled or has taken an online course or partly or as a hybrid. So these things are changing rapidly, and the cost of place is something that universities are dealing with, which is taking us again to the cost of facilities, the cost of planning. I've been in the business of architecture planning and design and construction, and the cost dollar per square feet for a new facility jumped just over the past 6 years from an average of $600 per square feet to $1,200 and $1,400 and even $1,500 per square feet. This is extremely expensive. The deferred maintenance issues, we mentioned the first wave and second wave campus expansion. We are talking about higher education administrators focusing more on new construction, just for the sense of accomplishment, and there's in general sense of negligence to deferred maintenance, and there are a number of decayed facilities on campus. So the deferred maintenance is so expensive, and issue operating and the stewardship of campus is also expensive. In the literature, also planning for complex model campuses are adaptive, what's known as complex adaptive assemblies, and it's very challenging, similar to cities and towns, how to regulate and how to control the growth of cities and towns. However, in college campuses, the administration of the college or the campus, it has a strong ability to make decisions about a lot of details more than in cities and towns, but it's very challenging, particularly when it comes to long-term planning. Short-term planning is, you can make quick decisions about let's build this building here, let's renovate that building, let's address the need of this academic department. But long-term planning for campus is very challenging. So there's a great number of recommendations provided by the experts and scholars in this study.
Recording stopped.
Yes.
Just carry on.
Please carry on.
So I'll try to go faster as well. There's an ongoing debate about the place-based model. There are those who believe that the legacy of the campus will survive. It's an American tradition. Families love to send their kids to college. There are those who believe that campuses are doomed, that there's no future for college, for the residential universal college experience. Everybody's going to go online. The threat is great. Most universities are becoming, more accepting of the technology, integrating this aspect, providing a hybrid model that integrates both worlds. A number of campus planning strategies trying to address the academic needs and the academic requirements, technological needs for the campus, trying to be innovative and trying to be more accountable when it comes to expenditure and the cost of space. That is very critical for the survival of college campuses. And there are so many recommendations for improved planning paradigm. This term, planning paradigm, is quite problematic because it depends on who's saying it and what it means to different groups of people. So in this study, planning paradigm is referring to the business model in higher education administration because senior administrators are the ones who are in charge of planning in higher education, unlike in cities and towns, which urban planners are in charge of it. That's a quick chart that summarizes Article 1. Basically, we're talking about emerging trends in higher education. These trends could be positive, could be negative, could be represent risks in themselves, could represent risks if you don't address them or integrate them. And we have a predominant paradigm in the middle that's pulling us down, which is investing in the campus, the quality of the campus as the only strategy to attract students without paying attention to other factors, and the improved planning model that in response to these emerging trends, and there needs to be some coordination and alignment between planning response strategies. And that is the goal is to reverse the risks and turn them into opportunities, which again is an indication of what was said in the literature, recommended by the scholars. One critical piece here that connects us back to the two waves we spoke about, the past wave in the post-war era. The past wave I'm referring to the recent one from the 1990s until today. There are some assumptions that fuel this. We're talking about there was a need to address deferred maintenance, decayed facilities. Institutions were able to address this partly. Moving forward, there's no choice, they have to allocate more funds for that. And there's consistency for the other, the support advanced research that was very common in the 1990s until today, that has to continue moving forward. Competition over students and faculty, same thing. And funding is becoming more of a problem. The conclusion is these emerging trends are serious risks and require innovative approach to respond to them. Residential campuses or residential model of learning is at risk. Universities need to figure out a response to that. And the unwarranted campus growth model need to be reviewed. And moving forward, we need to learn how universities are responding to these challenges. Article 2, in Article 1, there was extensive literature review, we've learned a lot. In Article 2, we wanted to go to the field or identify how universities are they aware of this, of what I just discussed, and how they are responding. So it's a cross-case study, document analysis. Article 2 is very challenging. It included a very thorough process of how to select the case studies in a way that is enabling us to answer the research questions, how to select what kind of documents we need, and how to do the qualitative analysis of the data. And at the bottom there, enrollment, academic facilities, these are the three consolidated trends grouped into enrollment, that refers to enrollments, revenues, financial pressures, academic, referring to all the issues, changes in pedagogy, academic technology, and everything related to that. Facilities is related to campus planning, design and construction, and the cost implications. There's the process using the the National Center for Education Statistics. Basically, we have sources of data, plus Nathan Groh's 2018's ranking of universities. He's one of the experts of the demographic cliff. So we wanted to get us a full understanding of how to select these universities. We ended up with 11 universities by applying 6 criteria points, starting with the entire list of public universities in the US, research 1 universities with compatible demographics or enrollment patterns, financial capacity, as well as regional priority in the Northeast and Midwest of the United States. Ended up with 11 universities that are listed there. So after that, I went and visited the websites of these universities and downloaded every single planning document that could relate to or provide useful information for my research. In general, there are 4 types of planning documents. Out of them, I've selected 2 types, which is the annual capital expenditure plans, and the last one, the foundation documents, the strategic plans, as well as the master plans. That's a chart that presents a very challenging process. We are talking about so many variables, 11 case studies. We're talking about 3 types of challenges, enrollments, academic, and facilities. 3 types of documents that I just made, capital expenditure plan, strategic plans, and master plans, and 3 levels of awareness. My advisors, I had some on my committee that are with so much expertise in higher education, and it was very important for them to distinguish between documents that just mention something about it, documents that actually discuss the issues at my research questions, and documents that present response and implementation of that. So within case study analysis, cross case study analysis, there's an immense amount of data, hundreds of files with data extracted and quotations compared across the case studies, and I was able to grade them. Literally, I was grading the documents. Every single document was getting a score in response to my analysis, and the results were how are these universities, for example, this, in response to the enrollment question, that shows a wide-ranging response of these 11 universities. Some of them are fully aware and fully responsive to the questions at hand, and some of them are not concerned as much or not responding to the enrollment question. And on the left, these are just very, very brief summaries of what is there. This qualitative research, I would suggest that you would read my documents available actually in our scholar works if you are interested in the details. And just providing some examples of some of the text that shows provided, how these universities are actually exhibiting awareness of providing strategies to increase enrollments and to figure out ways to provide funding. The second question about the academic question, it shows relatively, unlike the first question, is more comparable response, awareness and response of these institutions, which indicates that all these universities are actually doing something about the academic. All of them are fully aware what they need to do. And here at UMass, for example, and almost every single one of them has something similar. We build the integrated, like our building here is an example of how universities are responding, bringing together multiple departments for co-locating similar programs, providing facilities for education that provide technology. Integrated learning centers, another example of how the UMass is doing that. All these universities are doing that. However, this is seen that technology as a positive trend, but there's also a need to understand the risks that would come with this. These are some examples. As I said, all universities are providing the new type of classroom. The classroom today is like active, team-based learning, multi-use, shared, blended, flipped classroom. All these models of pedagogy and learning are being provided these days, and you are more aware of it. The third question was increasing cost of facilities. That was the most concerning to all the, in these documents, very evident that they are aware of the challenges, deferred maintenance, the operations, the supporting the campus, how to plan for conflicting priorities, and definitely some of them are more responsive than others, but in general, the facilities question was the most challenging out of all of them. And here are some examples that some UMass and other universities are trying to improve the planning, the practice of planning within the institution when it comes to capital improvements and decision making. This is another diagram that captures the Article 2. Basically, the 3 circles represent the enrollments, the academic, and the facilities. I was beginning to notice the correlations between them, and within each one of these points, there are references to our institution is a place-based model, or follows a place-based model. So that was beginning to highlight the risk of online learning and the risk of the cost associated with all these aspects. And on the top, how the leadership, the administration is doing the strategic planning and how they are developing strategies to save the day and to save the cost and develop a business model that's sustainable and planning strategies that will make a successful higher education institution in the face of these challenges. So the results are confirming the findings of Article 1, and probably my 5 minutes ended, but I will try to be quick in the remaining part. So there was definitely awareness. The enrollment question was the only one, as I said, there was no, some universities were talking about enrollment growth. and that's kind of a contradiction. Article 3, the last article, is the same research question as Article 2, and conducting interviews with representatives from these universities. And again, it's a cross case study. The same universities we spoke about, only 10 responded out of 11, and it was quite challenging how to get access, how to identify the senior decision makers in these universities, and developing the interview questions. And I had luck. It was very challenging, but ultimately I was very successful in interviewing 16 people in these 10 large public universities, and they are responsible for strategic facilities planning and campus planning in these universities. The research process is, again, gaining access, going through all the protocols, the rigorous process within case study analysis, recording, transcribing and analyzing the interviews, the open coding, again, the grounded theory approach, open coding and emerging themes from the responses that would develop the themes that define the concepts and the theories that represent what collectively in the minds of those administrators. And then the discussion and the conclusion, is this consistent with the literature, with what was being covered in Articles 1 and 2? This is just an example of I send this to every single one of the interviewees. The middle part is the challenging trends, enrollment, academic facilities. I wanted to see how you responded to these challenges that I identified in the previous 2 articles. In one of the questions, like, I wanted to measure the level of concern of these participants, and it was very consistent, even though completely separate from the results of Article 2. It's confirmed. Wide distribution, some of them are not concerned at all about the enrollment risks, simply because they have a very low acceptance rate. So if the acceptance rate is 10%, they're not going to be concerned about the future of the enrollment and the demographic cliff. And some others are quite concerned because they see it in conjunction with funding and the declining state appropriations and declining revenues and difficulty to maintain the campus. And I provided some quotes from that shows that the participants were actually aware, and they're doing 2 strategies. Here we can see that similarities, this strategy addressing the academic aspect, but at the same time using it to attract students. So that the academic strength is the best way to attract students, and the higher ranking and the stronger programs definitely are the best way to do that. And of course, an indication to the different way of thinking, the new way of approaching, how to reinforce a campus model. In response to the academic technology, similar to that Article 2, there was an overall similar response to that. They are aware of it, and they are not as concerned. They are confident. They have wonderful facilities, and you can continue to attract the best students. And of course, in the review in the literature review for Article 3, as well as in the interviews with the people, AI is a big thing, and I know that everybody now is using ChatGPT, and the impact of AI is amazing on everything. And here we have this case study. I think it's University at Albany. They are adding 27 staff of AI at almost every single department on campus, and it's becoming very integral. How is this impacting police? How is this impacting the design of facilities and the planning for future campus is something that we are aware of. The facilities question is the most concerning out of there's an overall agreement. This is the big question. Everything is conflicting, the cost is increasing. We have an ever-growing campus, shortage of workforce, the deferred maintenance that you're just unable to deal with, and all kinds of problems and issues. So this is the problem of the day, and this is just an example. They're using student revenues to cover facilities, and that is no way sufficient. For example, I just want to go off topic a little bit, or actually not off topic, just off my presentation a little bit. We're very pleased that here in Massachusetts, the Governor Healy, is providing fund $2.5 billion in support of higher education in Massachusetts. That's an example of how it's so critical for the survival of colleges and universities is government support. I like this chart. It's one of the documents that were shared with me with one of the interviewees, and because it really, this is for Ohio University, I think, it perfectly shows the history, the correlation between the total square feet of spaces and the student enrollments, and you can clearly see the from the pretty much from the 1970s until the 1980s, the drop in student numbers, right? And while the yellow lines are just almost like the size of the campus and the size of facilities was flat in the 1980s, right? And then we did a good job from the late 1990s until COVID. There was some kind of perfect correlation between the number of students and the number of spaces or facilities. But after COVID, see what's happening. There's a drop in both number of students and in the spaces. But this is very helpful for us to see that they are beginning to think that, internalize this challenge at their university and trying to develop a response for space optimization. This is one of the takeaways of my of Article 3, and in it I really combined all three articles together. There is a re-emerging finding of this dissertation. There's an old paradigm of thinking, old paradigm of planning, and there's a new paradigm of planning. So we wanted to measure how far have we gone from the old paradigm to the new paradigm of planning. And I personally would have been more generous in grading, because the middle is like the black dot is like where I'm grading them. But I have seen some, maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but some resistance from my committee. Some committee members are very critical, and they are thinking, or some of them are thinking, that universities are not doing enough, and universities are at great risk. So this is just jumping into the first one, for example, enrollments. The first assumption is growth-oriented, mindset. Like, keep growing. If you're not taking your debt, if you don't, you will come. The new approach is contracting markets assumptions. Like things are never going to be the same, right? And so on. So there's an old model of thinking from the 1990s and the new model of thinking that's moving. This is another thing that I started to touch upon in Article 2, which is the correlations we spoke about. Everything looks equal here, but that's really not the point. The point is that out of these 3 points, the strategies universities are developing, both from their documents and from their interviews, these strategies usually, they address two issues at the same time. So there needs to be a study of these correlations and the positive impact and the negative impacts. Like a doctor, when you give medication to any patient, there are side effects. So when you are developing these strategies in response to improve planning, so what are the correlations, and how can you address things, and how can you avoid problems, particularly for the place-based model, because we're talking about college like ours. So the results are confirming the findings of Articles 1 and 2, and there's awareness of the enrollments, some skepticism, and there's awareness and response to the academic aspect and to the facilities as well. The growth-oriented campus planning model is no longer valid. Universities need to be much more accountable in doing that. The conclusion is overall, all the findings from the 3 articles, there are consistent findings from the literature, from the documents, and from the interviews with the participants that we are dealing with a serious problem here. Everybody in higher education is aware of that. And there needs to be a more improved approach to planning, integrated, adaptable planning, particularly when it comes to capital physical planning and master planning. Need to align planning strategies with the academic plan, with the strategic plan, with all kind of institutional planning, with human resources, in order to make sure that the finances will work well for the university. So there needs to be a change in the mindset of how the business model has to change, how planning is happening needs to change, condition assessment for deferred maintenance, and lastly, space optimization. There's a lot of wasted spaces on campus, outdoors and indoor, need to be improved in that. For future research, simply how can the higher education community and government get together to save higher education and plan higher education for the next 20, 30 years that would become successful, And of course, issues such as artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and all these transformations happening, drones and all of that. How are we going to be conducting education? Is it going to be all remote? Can students learn without professors and instructors on their own, or we have to have a classroom and a place to learn. And here I stop, thank you. Sorry for being